I am joined, as promised for the break, with, I'm joined by Don Delnevo, the chair and spokesperson of the Payment Choice Alliance. Don, how are you doing today?
Well, it's Ron, Gabriel, but don't worry, yeah, I'm doing fine.
Ron, I've just looked up and I've seen Ron on the screen and Don on my sheet, but we're all good. I'll call you Ron from now on, I promise.
Yeah.
We're all right. Well, Ron, thank you for joining us live on That Money Show. I really appreciate it. And I think I've got a few questions to ask you about what's going on with cash in this country, because the old saying, cash is king, well, it seems to be, becoming less and less as we go on. I mean, is that what you're seeing?
Well, no, actually, the British Retail Consortium have just reported that cash use has gone up for the second year running, and Link, the ATM operators, who should know a thing or two, they just did a survey which shows that 45 million people in the UK still want the option to use cash. So rumours of cash's death are certainly exaggerated.
Well, there we go. That's actually what I like to hear, because I feel like we're starting to hear more and more problems around some places not taking cash in a shop. And of course, I say of course, but like you've just said, it's the opposite. More and more people want to spend in cash, want to have cash on them, want to have some level of cash usage within their life. So are there more problems in society as shops start to go cashless? Or again, are we seeing the reverse, where the cashless shops are deciding to do a bit of a U-turn on that decision?
Some of the businesses are doing a U-turn. I'm the chair, as you mentioned, of the Payment Choice Alliance, and we've been going to businesses like some of the pubs companies, and they have changed their course, and instead of rejecting cash, they're accepting cash again. But, we think that we need a law in this country that means that people's cash has to be accepted. They've got laws like that in France and Norway and Spain, all around Europe and a lot of American states. So it's ridiculous that businesses can decide one way or the other. We've all earned the money that we have to spend, and we should be allowed to spend it when we want to, not, decided by the particular business that we happen to have gone into that day.
Absolutely. I mean, you could argue that just from a logical perspective, someone comes into your shop with money, physical money, asking to give it to you in exchange for your products. Surely the basic, the standard setting should be, yes, sir, I will take your money in exchange for the thing I want to sell you, no?
Well, you obviously believe that, Gabriel, that the customer's always right, and I would agree with you, but some businesses have decided otherwise. But it's not the majority of businesses. There's probably in London about 20% of businesses, and other parts of the country less, that have decided to go cashless. But the problem is that it makes it difficult for people. People say, well, you can use your app and Apple Pay. Well, 8 million people don't have smartphones, so they can't use apps. Then we've got people who haven't got bank accounts. Then we've got people who've got disabilities. Then we've got people who budget using cash. 15 million people in this country budget using cash. So for all those reasons, because all those groups will be very badly handicapped if cash is not accepted, we need to have a law. And we also need a law because all the other payment methods are tracked. Digital payment methods are tracked, and they all depend on computer systems. So if you don't want to be tracked, you want to keep your privacy, and you also don't want to be potentially ruined by hackers, because we all know there's lots of computer hackers around. We need cash. It never gets hacked. It never crashes. It always works. So it's perfect from the public's point of view in that respect.
What about, I suppose, playing a bit of devil's advocate with you for a second? This idea that, times change, things develop, things happen. So perhaps it is time to phase out this form of money, because at the end of the day, money is just an exchange of something of value, right? And we are moving from a physical world into a digital world. That's happening, obviously, a large range of cases. And I understand, like you said, there are still quite a lot of people that are still within that physical world. So maybe we're not quite as far down the line as we thought. But by forcing shops to not allow themselves to transform into that digital reality, which is probably the way things will end up eventually, you are, in a way, stopping or slowing down this evolution. I know that obviously there are, that sounds a little bit, cyborgy, and like we're thinking about robots in the future and everything being like that. But like I said, like cash and money in and of itself is also quite a relatively new form of currency. So in the same way that got brought into having to be accepted in every single shop and being the standard unit of money, shouldn't there be, a discussion around moving into the next phase?
Gabriel, cash has been around for 2,500 years, so it's not exactly the new kid on the block. And the reason it's been around that long is because it worked. And also, we've got to be a bit careful with progress. When Concorde came along, everybody was saying, eventually we'll all be travelling supersonically in passenger jets. Well, the reality is nobody's travelling supersonically in passenger jets because there are no supersonic passenger jets anymore. So progress is what works for human beings, and cash works. It's been around for 2,500 years because it worked, and it works today. And what we can't afford is for some businesses to dictate to us that we are not allowed to use cash. It's not allowed in France, and I said it's not allowed all around the planet. And we are really outliers. It's the British people that are getting dictated to. So we've got to actually make sure we're not dictated to. We still have a genuine democracy here, and that we insist that the government pass laws to protect our right to use cash. It's as simple as that.
Well, Ron, you dealt with the devil's advocate argument very nicely there.
Thank you, Gabriel.
What is going on then at the moment? You mentioned this increase in the amount of cash going into the kind of society and throughout systems. What is driving this rise in cash usage for shop purchases in recent times?
Well, we've come out of the pandemic, and obviously there were some false health scares during the pandemic, and also a lot of sales moved online. Internet sales went up to about 37% of retail sales during the pandemic because people couldn't shop elsewhere. But now they're down to under 30%. So people are starting to go back to real shops on the high street and are spending their money there. We've also got the situation that people are feeling hard up now, quite frankly, and they're finding it difficult to make ends meet, to use an old phrase, so they're actually using cash to budget. If you go out in the evening, Gabriel, and you take a £20 note with you and you spend it, your money's gone. If you keep, waving a contactless card around, you might spend too much. So to get a bit of control of their lives, some people are using cash in that way. But we've also just got these people who don't want to be dictated to, people who believe in freedom and choice. And that's a lot of people, millions and millions of people now are saying, well, why are we going to let businesses say to us, we won't accept cash? And the worst thing is that it's not just commercial businesses. There are a lot of businesses who are funded by the government and local authorities who are actually, like the train services, who are not allowing us to buy food on trains because they say they're going cashless. Well, that can't be right. If public money is subsidising these businesses, they've got to accept the public's cash. It doesn't make sense to let them say, oh, you can't spend your cash here. So that's a huge issue now, and we want that addressed. But overall, we just need a law that says that all businesses must accept cash for in-person payments. And if we have a law like that, as they have in France and Spain and other countries, then the British public will get the protection they deserve.
So I was actually in the shop the other day, the petrol station, and someone was paying in cash, which they accepted. It was absolutely fine. But what I did notice was that the cashier was taking quite a lot of time to make sure that cash was legit, that it was a real note. Obviously there's a lot of fraud with cash, a lot of fake cash in circulation. It is a large and severe problem. So how does your argument take into account that side of things? The fact that obviously some would argue that cash is a lot easier to counterfeit than the other side of things. I mean, you might just say digital currency is just as easy in terms of other areas to be hacked into or to be taken advantage of for vulnerable people. But how do you see the government taking kind of back control of the idea of fraudulent money within society?
Well, they've got to deal with online fraud, haven't they? 2 million people had their identities stolen last year, and it wasn't because they were spending cash, it was because they were working online. So let's not get too wound up about some counterfeit notes. There aren't that many counterfeit notes circulating. There might be some £50 notes and some £20 notes, but the retailers all have simple ways of detecting whether it's a counterfeit note or not. There are very simple note checkers they can use, whereas online, the fraudsters are becoming really, really clever and are outwitting many of us and taking away our identities and emptying our bank accounts, buying things in our names that we didn't actually want to buy, and so on. So we've got a huge problem there online because the people who are hacking are very clever and they make huge amounts of money taking our wealth away from us. Nobody can take your wealth away from you in that way if you stick to cash. If you've got £100 in your wallet, if you're lucky enough to have £100, yes, somebody could steal that £100, but that's all they'll get. If they go online and hack into your accounts, well, they can take everything you've got.
I suppose if you're a business owner and you're looking to potentially reintegrate cash back into your business, it would help you and be incentivized if the government, you know, those pens that people use, you can like scribble on a note, and if nothing comes up, then you know it's a legit note. I mean, if they just made some kind of free resource that if you're a registered business, you can apply and get one of those straight away. Most you know, businesses that potentially say they don't want to go back into cash because they're worried about these counterfeit notes, they could just grab one of those.
Yeah, of course.
Problem sorted. That would be a great, nice little solution, wouldn't it?
Well, why wouldn't the banks that those businesses bank with provide those pens for them? Yeah, absolutely. Why can't they be provided to those businesses? But the problems of switching back to accepting cash, Gabriel, are exaggerated. In America, 8 states and many big cities have got laws now that say that businesses have to accept cash. And the businesses that have had to switch back to accepting cash have done it, and there'll be no complaints from them at all in the main, because they realise it's in the public interest, and they probably had the tills that they had taken out that accepted cash in storage anyway, so they've simply brought them back into the shops. So we can exaggerate the problems here. We've only been hearing about cashless for the last 10 years or so in this country. We had all those years when businesses were delighted to accept cash. So going back to those businesses accepting cash isn't a massive hurdle. They can do it, and they know it's in the public interest, so they should just get on with it.
So, Ron, not done. It seems like cash is still king. So thank you very much for your time here today on That Money Show.
Well, thank you, Gabriel. You're a prince for giving this subject so much time. Thank you very much.
My absolute pleasure. Well, there you go, everyone. Is cash still king? Well, according to Ron, Don Ron, I might call him now today, it definitely still is. Do I still have cash? Yeah, I think I've got a little bit. I think I've got some cash. I think my grandma gave me some cash for my birthday. So thank you, Grandma. You are keeping me in Ron's good books.